I'm Jill.
And I'm like, this is his daughter, Barbara. Hi.
Okay, I'm just a little.
Ruth and Doug. Sorry.
I don't know what he is, but I'll introduce you.
Is he new? Yeah, he's over there. So I missed the first part of that. Did you get to go on one of the tours?
Well, no, my plan was I was going to go on the tour.
Yeah.
But I went over earlier.
Yeah, and then it's a big, because we have the bus, it's limited. It's terrible. That's right. Some people say colds are what we test from. But it's such a cold. I think they're just but the rest of us all right. In some ways,
We have a good crowd.
Right, maybe like top of the staircase.
Courageously used his role as a Connecticut draft board officer to give deferments to those who sought them, despite the threats.
He was invigorated by their drives down green country roads in search of cheese curds and antiques. We children marveled at the legions of friends surrounding a crank who discouraged company at Thanksgiving. These friends truly showed Dad the time of his life, wining, dining, and indulging him, as well as arranging for shows of his work. Letting him studio space for his mobile making, begging for one of his custom-made cocktail party hats, and throwing him birthday parties that he looked forward to all year. Dad didn't talk about death. He had no interest whatsoever in dying. But he did say he would like to be buried here at this lovely little chapel near the farm where he's been so happy. My family is grateful that it was possible. And we take great comfort in the fact that he lies not far from the homes of people he loved with all his heart.
Thank you, Susan. I spent my first 2 days in Mineral Point, a place my dad and Dixie liked to go to, and they were always saying, you've got to come to Mineral Point, and I did finally. One of the people I've met there is Diana Johnston, who has a fabulous pottery, and I would totally recommend you go there and get the tour because it's pretty unbelievable. There's some kind of scary parts of it, but at any rate, one of the brightest things about it is how warm Diana is to me, to our family, to my dad. There's still plenty of mobiles to see. You can just walk in there and you can feel how much he must have loved that place. And they gave him a place to work, which is still sort of down in somewhere on the third level down. It's really quite fascinating. He and Tom Kelly also, she and Tom Kelly also gave him space to work. But anyway, I'd like to introduce Diana, my new oldest friend. Say a few things.
I think all of you knew Pedro so much longer than I did, but I I just met him when he was in his 90s, and I just fell hard. I loved him the minute I met him. He was so much fun, and I found out that he had written Calder at Home, which is my favorite book. I loved it for years, and when I found out he wrote it, I was just like, oh my gosh. And so anyway, we really liked each other right away, and I just have never met anybody like him in my life. He was so full of joy and life and enthusiasm, and I think that everybody in Mineral Point fell in love with him. Everybody I talked to fell in love with him. I mean, I don't know, he was the best. And Tom Kelly and I were lucky enough to have time to work with him in our studios, and he told us great stories and just had amazing things to say. One of the days that we were working down there, he said, you know, Diane, I have been so lucky in my life. People have been nice to me my entire life. And I said, it's you. I said, it's you. And
Share a little video. Right?
Hello everyone, I am Mark's son, the first grandson, and about 4 years ago I traveled to Florence to see Dixie and my grandfather with a production crew that consisted of my uncle Ray Reyes, who's a director, and my cousin, his son David, to take about 10 hours of footage of my grandfather talking about his life and his work. And we compiled a little trailer for a documentary that we're going to be putting together, that we've been working on since then, that hopefully will get somewhere further along this year. So I'd like to share a trailer of a movie that's going to be titled after the name of his memoirs, A Photographer's Journey. Thanks.
My name is Pedro Guerrero. I've been a photographer since I was 21 years old. I'm 92. I'm of Mexican descent, still brown, and I've had a fantastically glorious life, and it continues to be that way. The minute I developed my first roll of film and made my first print, I thought, this is mine, this is for me. It was a magic that I could control, and I still feel that way. I'm still amazed what could happen with just a click of a shutter. And then you take it to the dark room and you develop, and there it is, exactly as you visualized it. When I quit art center school, a year before they wanted me to, I knew one thing. I knew that I could work for my father. But that was too easy, you know. Everybody else worked for my father, but not I. Dad saw me stalking around, not knowing what I was going to do with my photography. He said to me one day, why don't you go up to the mountains? And there's a guy named Frank Lloyd Wright who's got a school, and he might need a photographer. I showed up at Frank Lloyd Wright's, and he said to me when he saw me, who are you? And I said, my name is Pedro Guerrero, and I'm a photographer. I had never introduced myself like that before. He said, would you like to work for us? And I said, as you can see, I don't know anything about architecture. And he said, I'll teach you. And so he said, you can start right now if you want to. And but I told him that I didn't have my camera. And he said, I have a camera that takes good pictures. It was a 5x7 camera. It didn't have a shutter. It just had a lens and a lens cap. And he used it when Phil was so slow and he could take the cap off and go and get a drink of water and put it back on. I heard somebody ask him, what kind of pencil do you use, Mr. Wright? And he said, my dear boy, it's not the pencil, it's the man. So when he came over and said, how come you're not using my camera and take good pictures? I said, Mr. Wright, it's not the camera, it's the man. It's the relationship with him. He just got to walk away. When I first met Alexander me Sandy. I can't imagine that Wright would have heard that, call me Frank. He wasn't particularly crazy about Wright, but he was impressed that I had spent some time with him. In fact, he tells a story that Mr. Wright came to him and he wanted to have a mobile made, but he wanted it on gold. And Sandy said, "I'm making it on gold, but I'm going to paint it black." Well, I photographed Wright till he died 3 weeks before he died. And Alexander called it 2 days before he died. And then eventually I photographed Louise Devilson a few 2 weeks before she died. So I decided I'm going to quit photographing on her. I mean, they're going to say, "Here comes Pedro Guerrero."
Responsible for enriching and extending Pete's life. His deep love for Dixie rejuvenated him, and her equal love for him made this a romance that delighted all who witnessed it. Pete happily lived long enough to see his rightful place as an artist, high among the great photographers of his time. This was widely recognized and reconfirmed by a new generation
His grandfather,
of admirers.
for $125, he took another $125 to the house next door for him to live in. So that's how it all started. But I'm here a little bit to talk about being his son, or being his child. He's finally stopped moving. Even when he was sick, it took much of the energy of much younger persons to get him to stay still. He's in the ground finally, much sooner than I thought. And even as the dirt settle around his ashes, I can't believe I'm moving through my life without him. But I'm not, because he's in my DNA. I see him when I look in the mirror. I hear him when I talk to my family members. He's there when I ask for my check at a restaurant. Anybody that's been around with me in the last couple of days, it hasn't worked all that well, but he's only a little less here than he was on his birthday last year, a week before he died. His eyes twinkling, he was cracking wise, and he was still with us and through us. I don't know whether to thank him or to curse him, but today I am grateful for his life, and I choose to ignore that tiny moment in his good long life, his death. His notoriety and his background is for why so many of us have come to remember him, is because he was, and I feel it's safe to say is, a photographer. And behind me are some of the pictures that we have of his. Now, the irony of having my father being a photographer is all of our family pictures don't have him in them, because he was behind the camera. And these are some of the pictures of him when he was younger. That's his mother. We can just kind of go through them. That's him admiring his mother, eating, I believe, fruit. He was, as we can see, excruciatingly handsome as a young man. He used to say, people would come up to him and say, "Hey, you look really good." And he would always say, "Well, looking good has never been my problem." This is some of the work he was doing, and this is some of the things that our childhood is based upon. When I was a kid, I lived in New Canaan, Connecticut, which is this sort of basically it's where all the IBM people live. And you go to school, and somebody would say, I'd say, "What does your dad do?" And they say, "Oh, he works for IBM." I said, "Well, what does he do?" And I'd say, "I don't know, he gets on the train every day." And I could say my dad's a photographer. And people would immediately know what that meant. And I could also go down to Breslow's downtown and pick up a magazine and say, "Hey, so my dad took that photograph." But I never did, because you know what? He was my dad, he was a photographer. And people say, "What's it like? What's it like to be the son of Frank Lloyd Wright's photographer?" I'm like, I don't know, because I've never not been the son of Frank. I can't compare it to him. That's my mom and my brother. I'm not sure where that is. I think it's probably in Westchester County. That's obviously taken by my mother, who was notoriously known as That's Susan. That's my brother Mark. That's me and my sister. Now you'll notice the ones, he took that in early on, like 19...
Oh, the next one?
Oh, yeah, the one we just had, this one. He's a Taliesin, and What's interesting about this picture is I think he's what, 23, 22, and he's wearing blue jeans. And that didn't happen again for another 60 years, I think. Then he went into the war. Now, he did go into the Army, and he ended up, after serving valiantly, he heard one gunshot, he told me, in the entire time he was in Italy. But he did come back to, this is my mother, they got married like the day before he went to Italy. And after he was there for the duration, I don't know what that was, probably 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
He came back to New York, my mother and he were going to make their, she was an artist and he was a photographer, and they were going to make their, hit the big time in New York City, which, if you can make it there. We're going backwards with that. Obviously, he's about to get in an airplane and drop some bombs on some people. That's there's a whole series of photos my dad took of him and my mother in this apartment. I'm wondering if you ever ate the pineapple. That's good. Next. This is a picture he took in New York City, but I put it in here to indicate the New York City years. So I actually don't even know if that is New York City. Do you know if that's New York City?
It's probably here.
Next one. So it's my mother working at her studio. She illustrated a couple children's books there. Once you know, Susan came along 29 years ago, and that's her. She was an only child briefly, and she still talks about those times. That was in New York City. They had a good time, being the only child. That might have been taken in Canada, but you can see if you look at the grandchildren, great-grandchildren, I think you can see a lot of similarities there. Then my brother came along. And sometime around this point, they decided that it's time for them to go out to the suburbs. And I believe he took a train out to Darien and walked over to somebody, and I think he had $5,000 he wanted to spend. That's my brother. That's the picture, by the way, that we've been looking for. They decided that they'd look for a place to live, and I think they had $5,000, and they went to a realtor, and of course real estate out there is really, really expensive, but they did find one place. And we'll see a picture of that in a second. I think maybe, no, that's still New York. My mother took it. They found a place that was nothing more than kindly called a shack. It was a summer cottage that went along with a bigger house down the hill. The gazebo in the background was there. It now lives in Vermont with my sister. It's the site of many family weddings, or at least 2. This is our old front yard. Let's see, I think we've got a couple more. Now you can see that this place was sort of falling down. It doesn't do it justice here. They're doing a little work. My mom is either posing or actually removing a nail from the wall over there. I don't know who that guy is, but he's doing some work on the house. You can see it's starting to come together with the house that we grew up in. And there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of, certainly some right influence in this. This part over here is the original part. And we'll see what, in 1955, they got David Henkin to design this extension on the house so there'd be a room for every kid. They had 2. And as they dug hole, my dad loved to tell stories on people. He had a story for everyone. So his particular story on this was, we dug the hole to put in the extension, the addition, and your mom came out and told me she was pregnant with you. So we already didn't have enough room. I believe that's me. That's Susan holding it. That's a shot of the house that sort of, we have to kind of go with, I believe, probably one of us kids took that photograph. That's the addition. While Barbara was, we're waiting for Barbara to come, we took, our life was sort of for a long time a series of annual very good Christmas cards. I colorized this one a little bit, but my dad, I think he put it on a timer probably, and he ran over and came and sat down, and there's about 1 million of these, and I don't know whether we actually ever sent one of them out. We didn't. Anyway, but Barbara, who is now there, was born August after this is what my dad did on the inside of the place. It was very nice. It was a different sort of a home. It was not like the colonials that were all up in the ridges, as we like to call it, where all my rich IBM buddies lived. I swear we're going to put the facing on those shelves. Just some casual photographs of what's going on. Great gardens. And it snows in Connecticut now and then. And so here's a picture of my dad. You'll notice he looks a little grumpy here. We'll get back to that later. He liked to dig. I guess that's why I put the shovel picture next. That's in Arizona. Now, interesting, we had horses. Susan was a horse person, and we had a little barn built for the horses. But one of the problems we had was there was no water or electricity down there, and horses need a lot of water. And, So my dad said, well, let's just dig a trench down to the barn. And of course, my brother and I were like, well, we got paper out. So the man, I think I spent probably 3 or 4 hours in that trench, but he just would get up when he had spare time, dig a 4-foot trench. And Connecticut is peculiar to the fact that there are so many rocks. If you dig one little hole, you get 100 pounds of rocks out of there. And actually, probably about where he is right now, he finally met a rock that was a challenge. So if I'd taken that picture a week later, whoever took it, you would see that thing would suddenly take a sort of a little S around his gigantic rock. But he did it, and it was pretty amazing. And if we had any problems with our chairs, he would. Now here's he with his brother. One day they decided they needed to fix the chimney, so he got up and fixed it. And if it snows enough, he feels like to save the ceiling from caving in, he would get on the roof and shovel the snow off. Now, meanwhile, I tell you, the whole time, the whole time, he would really want us to help. And he would love to instill in us, I think, and maybe he has to some degree, like this thing where he couldn't stay still. There was so much to do, and my brother and I were by now sort of smelly teenagers, maybe just a little earlier than that, and he kind of expected us to do it. And my mother was like, oh, they don't, just leave them alone, they got stuff to do, and he did it all, and I'm just saying that. So let's go forward a little bit. One Christmas he got some cellophane, colored cellophane, and this is our front dining room, and he made this stained glass window. And we have a couple pictures he took of himself. I don't believe he did that one, but he was planning on finishing that. It's a party, famous New Year's Eve party. Okay, here he is. Well, I'm sure he's probably having a conversation about Vietnam or something. He has this very bad taste scarf that he got in the war that has all the Axis symbols. There's a swastika and a rising sun. Every once in a while, he'd take it out and wear it. It might be particularly controversial. And that was one of those times I remember that casserole dish. He was styling, got the sunglasses. He was also a justice of the peace, like I was, and my sister Barbara is now, and did a couple of weddings at the house. This is one of them. He was famous for, again, he wouldn't stay still. I don't think I remember. The only thing he would do in repose was read the New York Times every day. Otherwise, you just had to chase him around all day. Now, right now, he found a shoe here on the side of the road, and he was mounting it. It's not me. And he was mounting it with anticipation of making a lamp. And he made a lamp out of that. He spray painted it gold, and he put some grapes in it, and he got it back for it. Somebody has it. Then the mustache came along. There's the New York Times. I think he took this of himself in a hotel room. Now, that's a famous shirt that I may have shown up earlier. talked about it. He got that on Carnaby Street. That muscle shirt, whenever he was lost weight, he put that thing on. And I think he wore it for till the end. I'm very jealous of that shirt. I wish I had it. Next. During the war, as was mentioned earlier, there was something called moratorium that 71, I think. And part of what you had to do was wear a black armband to show that you were against the war. And this is, I guess we're all getting ready to do our day here. I come from a non-violent family. We don't, we never physically violent. Sometimes we get a little arguing with each other. But the only time in my school years that I ever got in a fist fight with somebody was when somebody came up and ripped my armband off me at junior high, and I think blows were exchanged. And that seems ironic to me, but I wish I could remember what was next. Oh, okay, so this is I stole this from the internet. It's basically Chicago. I think, I'm confused, to be honest. I thought that we went to Europe in 1968, but I think during the Democratic Convention?
69.
Well, at any rate, skip this one. We'll go to the next. So we went one year, we decided he was going to go to Europe. And, we were like, okay, let's go to Europe. My brother graduated high school, and he went and hitchhiked around Europe, while the rest of us went around Europe. Now, when we traveled, particularly with my mother, we didn't go to hostels. We went to, like, the snazziest hotels in the entire world. And, of course, Barbara and I was 12, Barbara was, what, 10? We didn't care. All we wanted was our own room, and it was actually a trip that I will never, ever forget. And I continue to try to replicate when I go every 25 years when I go to Europe, whether I need to or not. So this is looks like the Roman Forum. He was probably translating the Italian for somebody. This is us. This is our Europe piece. So we can just yes. Now I always thought that was a weird photograph of him. But I think it's the first occurrence that I had of the ascot showing up. And I don't know whatever happened to that hat. It was in rotation for a long, long time. But I think that's our... This is what you would get at your door if you invited our family over for And again, I think we're trying to do a Christmas card here. There's a bunch of these together. That dog was 16 years. I don't know what that was all about. I think we're celebrating that car. Now, I can't tell how much of that tequila is empty there, so I'm not exactly sure what's behind that photograph. That's my mom. Eventually, my dad went out on his own, and this is his apartment. We saw a picture of that elsewhere. That's his New York City apartment. It's my sister's graduation.
High school, yeah.
High school graduation. And that's probably one of the last pictures we had all together as a family. I wish I still had some of that picture. All right, so in '76 we lost my mother in the original house on the same day. And so I think it was a big event for our family. I know it brought, what it did actually was bring my father back to my life. He'd been away. I was 20. That was my mother. A picture I think my dad took of my mother. And we found ourselves without a family home. Barbara was at school. Susan was, I believe, in Danbury. Mark was in California. I was without a place to live. So the first thing we did was we decided that we would build, that's the house. Right. And the little story behind this, I don't know how it got out of order. It's probably my fault. My parents would travel together, and every time they'd get in a return trip, my mother would say, well, I guess it's time to go back to grim reality. So my dad made this song. All right, so we built another house. Now there's a lot of good things and bad things about that. We didn't think very hard, but we did eventually build a place to live in 1977. That was a rock that was in our front yard. That's, again, you can see maybe that's not your typical Connecticut colonial that we're putting in there. Digging a lot of holes. That's the family minus Susan in front of the construction of the place. That's a picture of me in my younger years. We don't need to go into that. And this is a view out of the front. Now, that barn there is the same barn that was in the background of the digging picture. And we swore we were going to finish this house too. That's my grandparents. It's called two colors. More shots of that house. There's the gazebo. There's my dad about to operate a table saw. Now, you'll notice in the pictures, he starts to look a little grumpy. It's like, he's kind of grumpy. What's going on with that? Where's that happy, non-grumpy dude? There's his first 3 grandchildren. Still, what's with the face? Well, now he's got his hat on now. Now, as a babysitter, maybe not the greatest. He's got your 2 kids on the tractor driving them around the yard with it. That's all right. That's Antonio. See, he's still at. What's the deal? Oh wait! Suddenly he wasn't so grumpy anymore, and he's spending a lot of time out of town. And something was going on, and we got to kind of figure out what it was, and this woman came into his life. There he is in front of his birthplace. I would say he was 80. And now, there's a tradition when you go to Arizona that you drive down to Casa Grande and you take a picture of him, or you take a picture in front of his birthplace. There's Dixie. I don't know where he is, but it's one of his non-mustachioed limits. Did you recognize that? The other. Okay, now one day I felt like I used to go into his house. We lived in separate houses, and I'd go into his house. I'd go in there and make sure he's all right. He was getting on in years. He was like 78. And just to make sure he made it, he'd be eating his grapefruit. And one day I called him, and he wasn't home. And I got a call from, I think he finally called me. He said, "Son, I'm in the hospital." I said, "What?" "Yeah, I felt a little faint today. Never actually been sick a day in his life that I know of." He had that. Nothing really. And of course I panicked and went down there, and it turns out he had some issues, but he did end up having a pretty bad bout of esophageal cancer. We went to the hospital. We had the best doctors that we could get, and the doctors, I was out in the hall at one time, and the doctor was saying, "Oh, he's 80 years old. Come on, this is slow moving. Why do we want to give him a big bad operation like that?" And I went in and said to him, "You got to make this decision," and he decided to do it, and lo and behold, he did. And this is after that first surgery. Also, this is my picture of him. I'm way out of my, as usual, I'm not following my script. That's my brother and him in Europe. There he is again. About the same time he had cancer, we learned my brother's dead in California. That was a big blow to everybody. I didn't expect my brother or my father. That's actually my grandmother's funeral. I also did Sugar House. So we kept hearing a little bit about this place called Florence, and all of us had traditionally, when we go to Arizona back in the olden days, my grandfather would take us in the car, and we'd drive down to Florence. He'd point out various scenes. Down the street is where my uncle was born, over here is whatever it is, but it was like, okay. But anyway, there's this place that my dad bought all of a sudden. And there's a picture of it. There they are on the porch. That's him with his brother. How it went is, the man suddenly, he had become progressively grumpy. And we used to actually call him Grumpa. And suddenly he wasn't so much, and we got to find out that he had fallen in love not only with Dixie, but this little town in Arizona. So, okay, let's see what we got going on there. It wouldn't be complete without this photo. He didn't like dogs, but boy, he liked dog dude jokes. And you have to remind me when exactly this 5 years ago they got married. He sent me a postcard, I think, saying they got married. And then they got married. I don't know why she's got there's a reason that she can tell you why he's wearing this. Long story, yeah. He's wearing a shower cap. It's not. I think that's Antonio's wearing. Now you'll notice he's not so grumpy anymore. Great-grandchild. I think that's Iris. Now that I go see him, and there's hundreds of pictures. Dixie and Dad traveled all over the world, and actually the amazing thing was about he'd get sick and be like, all right, he's really, really sick. And like 6 months later, like, I'm going to Italy. What? They go to Italy, and there'd be a million pictures like this, and I think there's a book in that, because there's like everywhere in the world. I believe this is when he was doing the, I see the hats there, I believe he was doing the hats. Yes? All right, then this happened. Now, the guy never stopped, is what my theme was. I mean, he did this cocktail party hats thing, and that was his thing. And then one day, he started this actually in Connecticut 35 years ago, where he had this, found a shovel piece and another thing, and he just hung them up on the wall by a hook. And he has I don't think that's not the original, but there's plenty of them. And it's like, holy, you go out there and, I don't know if anybody's had an opportunity, but like I'll say, people used to go to the Calder shows and say, give me a coat hanger, I can do the same thing. You can't. You can try, but you just can't do it. He had a really fantastic sense of composition. And he used to, they used to call him into the high school to do judge photo contests. Like look at the work of the students and pick who's ever's best. And occasionally he would not pick a winner because he didn't think any of it was any good. And the whole thing about the man was composition. And that's what he taught me, certainly. I don't know if I picked up anything, but I do know that that's why those are so good. There's, I don't know what's going on there. Tequila. That's his sister.
Rare photo.
That's a trip we took out to Connecticut. That's the Philip Johnson house. He did a very nice little oral history there. I don't know where that is. Is that legal fence?
Yeah.
Now, I took that picture probably 60 years after the first one. It's not exactly in the right place, but it works pretty cool. Actually, that's Las Vegas, right? Now, last year at some point, Hannah and I went out there, and we had to put together this sculpture there. Hannah helped to do it.
Who's the cemetery?
I think this is at the Disney. Started to look like a celebrity there. That's his sisters there. That's his two sisters. They're probably having an argument. There he is. See, now that's making a bogey, guys. That's my favorite picture. I'm just going to see if I can fix this. I mean, every time I saw him, I was amazed. Every time I saw him, I was amazed. He could be very, he's very thin there, but he was working, I don't know what he was going through negatives or something there. And often he'd be just sitting there with his wire and his stuff. And there's millions of stories about how if you turn your back wanted was get the company truck out of Hop, and I won't get into all the gory background details, but finally we were able to. We had enough cousins around that we went and opened this family warehouse, and we literally almost carried it out of the place, put it on a flatbed and took it down to his place. But that was a happy day for him. We talked about it for years, and we finally got the family truck. He learned to drive in that car. It's a 1917 Model T. That's that sentiment shot. Okay, we'll just stay there. I try to get, somehow let folks here know what the story is with my dad and what he said to his son. It's sort of, I had every kind of relationship you can have with a person I had with my father. And at the end, he was my best friend. And this was taken on his 95th birthday in front of his birthplace. And that's where I guess I'm going to end it. Let me just say that we're fortunate that his energy was so strong.